Hello, it's Rachael the Omen Witch here. I want to talk to you today about where I've been and what I've been up to since I was last doing videos consistently, which was many years ago now. A bunch of you know me best as Rachael the Love Witch. I started my business and my life as a witch for hire with that name, and of course with a focus on love. Still love doing romance-focused tarot readings, but my focus has definitely changed, which is evident in the name change. But there's a lot that brought about this shift in focus that isn't evident, and I want to share that story with you. Where I last left off with videos, I was living in the inner north of Melbourne, and I was still very much in the world of offering spell work to clients. I went through the challenge of needing more space, and I currently had to do that, and then having the opportunity to move into the double garage in the backyard of where I was living. I was able to sort of move my business into that space. I got to really spread myself out, and I moved through a lot of feelings about taking up space and working to be okay with that. It was really good growth for me on a lot of levels. But even during that time of needed expansion, I had this inkling that I needed something else too. I was very passionate about doing spells for clients, but I was also feeling increasingly tired because of the huge weight of responsibility I was carrying and the enormous demands all that energy work was placing on me. But I had this huge space to work in, to dance in and work till dawn in, and I absolutely did those things. I always had enough room to say yes to another client. There was always more space on my table to say, yes, I'll do that for you. And I can see now how I couldn't downsize my offerings within the context I was in. I knew that on some level, but it became profoundly clear once I moved to the Dandenongs just how much I needed to downsize after this beautiful time of expansion. I also learned just how much my nervous system needed a quieter environment than the suburb I was living in at the time. That's when I went through one of the biggest tower moments of my life. This was all pre-pandemic, I believe, and was happening throughout the pandemic, to just give you an idea of timeline there. As you would expect from such energies, looking at the depiction of the tower from the Rider-Waite-Smith, it was painful, necessary, and it was a shock down to the very foundations of my life. Oh God. During that time it became clear that I'd gone through some growth that meant I needed to relinquish the place I had lived in for over 4 years and was very settled in. I found a huge amount of acceptance once I moved to Melbourne from Canberra, but in that house and that context, I was very much the odd one out again. I was a shadow worker surrounded by folks who had trouble meeting their own shadow. There was also more for me to learn about myself that really got thrown up in my face at that time, and I consciously decided to take on those painful lessons as part of riding the enormous wave of what the tower was bringing me. So it was transformative pain that had me relinquish what I felt I needed to survive, the place I'd been living in for many years, and transition to the Dandenong Ranges, which, just for context, is about 40 minutes away from where I was living at the time. I thought, right, if I'm going to do this arduous move, I'm not going to just move to Northcote, as much as I enjoy that area. I'm going to make all of this big and move to the hills. I had not thought it was time to move to the hills, but it turns out it was. And once I really accepted the lessons being thrown at me and that my life was being uprooted and all the things that had not been working were going to be revealed, and they really were revealed, interestingly, then this flow opened up. A big part of the intense emotional pain lifted, and I was able to find what I needed in the hills quite swiftly, actually. Something crucial that I must add in this is I was in terrible emotional turmoil during this time, but I was being guided. I had visions, insights from spirit that were my life raft. And these messages showed me that I was metaphorically moving from balancing a lot of things on a not so sturdy platform to a place of very sure-footed stability. And that there would be a jolt as part of that process, but I would land firmly and soundly. I held on to this and it really guided me through the storm I was in. And this message kept proving itself to be true and an apt insight into what I was moving through. I'd also done a meditation where I was able to connect with the energy and spirits of the trees at my partner's place. He had moved to the Dandenong Ranges a year ago at this point. He had previously lived around the same area that I was now moving out of. So I connected with the roots and energies of these trees, and they told me / showed me in my mind's eye that there was a place close by where I would be welcome and safe. Safety and acceptance are really emphasized in this message here. This meditation came with so much authority, as it was a message from the trees. It was a message from beings that are interconnected with most, if not all, of the earth and all the other trees and plants. They know the land, they know us, our energies and our movements. That's something I really came to understand on a deep level. These trees knew what I needed and where I could go. I had beseeched them and they had answered. And most importantly, I knew how to listen. I've been practicing the skills and disciplines of a witch for years now, intensely so, and this gave me the ability to hear and use what I was receiving. I still needed to, of course, put in the effort to find the share house that matched up with this energy, but I did, and really quickly. I could talk at length about how when we sync up and accept our lessons, it can often make it easier for us to find what it is we need next, but that's a big and naturally very complicated topic for later. Now, how do I describe what this place has done for me and changed me? Oh my god. Well, I found another level of acceptance being here. I found even more folks that seemed to easily understand what I was about. And I love how living out here, you really are way more in touch with wild animals, with wild spaces, with the reality of huge trees falling down, floods and bushfires. It filters out a lot of folks who can't handle the awesome power and potential devastation of nature and just want neat lawns and control. I didn't know how much I needed that till I was out here. There was a little video I shot though just before I found, I think, my current place in the hills, where I was sensing this. And I was sensing that I suited wilder spaces and ways. I had been craving wild spaces, even as I loved all the excitement and opportunity in Melbourne. Inner Melbourne, that is. And I'll play that little clip for you now. I picked it up and I was like, I really like this as a symbol of myself. A black, tatty feather. I thought, yeah, that feels like me right now. This like more wild, unkept, maybe not so practical thing that, I mean, look, this is my garden bed. It's very overgrown. And there are plants in there. It's not exactly how I want it to be, because I'd like there to be more plants and less weeds growing in there, but it also does feel like me. And then there's all this horribly mown down grass that just looks awful, that now the minor birds are getting stuck into, because kept lawns are just their haven. They're just their haven, which is not the best. We're not trying to create havens for invasive, difficult species. But there's something about place here. There's something about place in all this move that feels important. Sometimes a place hinders you, sometimes it allows you to be who you need to be. And I feel that my overgrown, tatty, borderless kind of way of being doesn't have a lot of space here. Not in these suburbs. Not in this particular suburb. Not in these rigid spaces. With strong boundaries. Minor birds. So many of them are sitting up there. There's not a lot of space for the wild and the tatty and overgrown, and there's not a lot of space here for this kind of being that I see in myself. I'm interested to see the way in which that I change, moving to this very different landscape. I found that living in the forest was what I had always hungered for, that I'd been searching and needing this my whole life, without quite knowing it. But I had been searching for the land that I belonged to, for the forest that is home, my home. That living surrounded by frog calls, thick mist in winter, rain-drenched eucalyptus and fern forest is everything to me. I found that I belonged to this place and that it welcomed me in return. Yeah, I know. I understood what all those witchcraft and pagan books had described about being able to talk to trees and the way a place can feel alive and awake, especially if the spirit of the place is strong. And the spirit of this place out here is so strong. Sometimes the power and the pulse of this place, it's like I can feel it in my blood and it almost hurts. It's wonderful. I feel in constant communication with the land, the wind, the elements and all the creatures here, just on a whole new level. Like I had some sense of that in my past life, but it just was on a different level out here. And I found my personal animal divination practice of paying attention to the movements and potential messages of animals absolutely boomed. It got huge. It became this enormous part of my life. I was learning so much from the presence of the prolific wildlife out here and continue to. It's been so profound. It's been hard to sum up and to tell you about in a video. For the first time in my life, I know what it is to belong to a place. I did not belong to Canberra or to the people there. And as a white person who is very cut off from my European and distant Aboriginal heritage, I didn't know it could be like this. Being close to this land now is central to my life. It is now my foundation. It is one of my primary reasons to live, to be a steward of this place, to protect it and honor it. That is now a pillar of my life. And all of this, inevitably, as it should be, brought me into closer contact with Aboriginal Australian knowledge bases, which also now makes up a very foundational part of my beliefs as a pagan. It's hard to express how much of a gift this has been for me and how much comfort and stability the Australian Aboriginal stories and worldviews offer me. This place changed my witchcraft in a lot of ways too, but that's better to explore another time as that's a very big topic. Living in this new location allowed me to change my business and answered those small calls that were inside me that told me I needed to slow down, to do less spells, to stop saying yes to everything in terms of client work. I now have a much smaller space to work in, and I actually love it. I physically do not have the space to say yes to all the spells possible, and I needed that in order to really change how I was doing things. I was running myself into the ground trying to prove my worth by doing all of the things. Being slowed down and not being able to do as many spells because of the limitation of space, I was able to hear my changing needs and what they were in greater detail. I've gone into this before, what some of those factors were, but I could best sum it up that I became someone that wanted to listen to spirit, to listen to the clues and omens from nature, and to push less. Really enjoyed most people I worked with, and my long-term client base has been made up of a lot of really respectful, good people. But a lot of folks looking for spells are struggling to listen. To listen to me, to listen to the therapist, to take on board what a book may be saying about attachment theory, to be settled enough within themselves to even recognize an animal omen if it turned up. They unfortunately only hear the screaming of panic or pain that is inside them, and they are very understandably looking to address that. But if you can't get quiet and listen to other parts of yourself or hear anything above the distress inside yourself, then there's a lot of pushing for results. Pushing for doomed relationships to repair, for life paths, jobs, relationships, and outcomes that aren't for them or very likely to work out to be what they need. So it ended up being very difficult work to help these people on so many levels. I would only take on clients that I felt I had a real chance of my magic assisting them, but there was a lot of doing magic for very stuck situations. The magic was always going to have a very hard time shifting. I'm sure you can imagine how disheartening that was for me and the client. I also encountered a huge amount of people seeking me out because they were trying to bypass the real source of an issue with magic. I've written a lot of blog posts addressing what magic can realistically do, as I've been really preoccupied with the bombardment of folks thinking magic was a cure-all, a silver bullet, a get-rich-quick scheme, a way to make everything better, which it is none of these things. I've also been deeply disheartened and sometimes honestly sickened by the way spellcraft and witchcraft has been co-opted by capitalism, which has created this narrative that these things are just another way to make capitalism work better for you. I want very little to do with that, so that really cuts down my client base. But most importantly, and this was actually the hardest to reconcile with, was that my heart wasn't in it anymore. Even for the long-term clients that I love supporting, at some point I had to admit that I loved being a witch and a healer, but I couldn't keep doing spells anymore. Time for that was over, and following my heart is what made me start my business in the first place, and has been a key aspect that guides me in my life. So when my heart no longer is in something and I'm called elsewhere, that's just how it is. And some of you would have seen the change as it was in motion. The way my offerings changed, the phasing out of spell work, the name change come into effect, the emphasis on divination. So as you can see, this has been a time of huge change for me on so many levels. I hope you can get a sense from what I've shown you of just how big this last couple of years has been for me, and why I've changed my business model and my offerings in such a way. I'm very much a different person now, and my business, being from the heart, ended up changing along with me. It had to be relevant and true. I look forward to creating many more videos for you in the coming year. I really want to share with you not just things related to magic or animal divination, but how life affirming it is living so intertwined with nature, to not feel alienated from the land, but to know the ways of the forest, of the unique landscape I live alongside, and what it is to be known by the spirits of place. And I want to share this with you so that you can also understand the way in which this can apply to you. You can have this as well. It's, of course, as I've said many times, life-changing, all of this, and has drastically changed my worldview and what I consider important in this life. So until next time, my friends, this has been the Omen Witch.